the puppet asks, well, what does conscience mean? Because the fairy says, always let your conscience be your guide. And he says, well, what does conscience mean? And then the bug, who's like all puffed up because he wants to impress the fairy, pops down and gets on his little matchbox and gives this like horrible little lecture about how to behave properly. That's just like ideological chatter. It's generic moral advice that anyone could give that's kind of dull and also puffed up and grandiose, and he's just not very good at it. So, and that's why he's on his little matchbox there with his chest puffed out. And so he says, that's just the trouble with the world today. He's diagnosing the whole world, and you know, the fairy, she thinks he's kind of funny because he is. And you know, it's sort of, there's a real interesting thing here going on because he's male and he's all puffed up with his knowledge, which is completely shallow, and then he's put in contact with this like celestial feminine ideal, and he just turns into a complete moron. And that's exactly what happens to men. It happens to them all the time. So anyways, she decides to give him a chance and turns him into this conscience, and all of a sudden he's this like 1920s millionaire. So he's been ennobled. But then she tells him that, you know, he has to journey along with Pinocchio in order for things to go properly, and he promises that he'll be a good conscience and do it, and he already thinks that he can do it, and that's why he's on the matchbox podium, you know, espousing his morality, but the reality turns out to be much more complex. So the bug has a little talk with the puppet, and the bug tries to tell Pinocchio explicitly what it means to be good, and he gets completely tangled up in the explanation because what the hell does he know, and the puppet doesn't understand anything that he says anyways. And so there's a message there, and the message is the kind of knowledge that the conscience and the puppet are supposed to co-create is not something that you can articulate easily as a table of rules. It's not like that, because life is too complicated to just have 5 rules that you live by and that will solve every problem. Partly because the rules will conflict. That's a huge part of the problem, right? One moral guideline contradicts another in a situation. It's like you don't know what to do.